The best leaders are not the ones who are always on. They're the ones who know exactly how to show up when it matters most. Because when the standards are unclear, people fill in the blanks themselves. When communication is vague, misalignment grows. And when leaders avoid hard conversations, small problems become expensive ones. But the ones who get it right build something much stronger. Trust, clarity, alignment, and the kind of culture where people know exactly what's expected of them. And that's why this conversation stood out to me. My guest today is Mike Cordova, CFO of Anvil Corporation, a full-service engineering company that's been serving clients since 1971. Mike oversees finance, HR, legal, and supports IT. But what makes his perspective so valuable isn't just the breadth of his role. It's the way that he thinks about leadership, team design, and accountability. In this episode, we unpack 3 leadership lessons that every leader can use. First, the difference between being technically available online and being actively available for your team. Second, why telling the hard, ugly truth early in the interview process is your ultimate cheat code for long-term success. And third, why the best leaders refuse to solve every problem themselves and how this forces their teams to get stronger. If you lead a team where you're trying to build a culture of accountability without burning your people out, you're gonna wanna take notes on this one. And real quick, if you're gearing up for a critical hire right now, but you're tired of staring at a blank page trying to figure out exactly what you need, I've done the hard work for you. I've put together the ultimate hiring swipe file. It gives you 10 plug-and-play candidate profiles using my exact 5-category framework. So you can just copy, paste, and hire the right candidate with 100% confidence. The link to download it for free is down in the description. Go grab that. And then let's get into it with Mike Cordova. Can you just start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about Anvil?
Sure. Hi, I'm Mike Cordova. I'm the CFO of Anvil Corporation. We're a full suite engineering services company. We've been around since 1971. We're primarily a Western operations center, but we've served businesses around the world actually, and enjoy doing that. I've been with the company now for just over a year. Excited to be here in the services industry, which has been part of my career, and excited to be with Anvil. It's a great company, great culture, fits something I've been trying to match for quite some time and really enjoy it.
Nice. And then your role with Anvil, right? Tell me a little bit about your particular role and, some of the skills that are important for you and your team.
Sure. So I am in charge of, obviously, CFO. I'm in charge of finance. So that includes the accounting functions, the FP&A functionality. I'm also in charge of legal for the company, and in charge of HR. I dabble in IT when needed. Try to be helpful there. The skill sets for the team. The first thing is show up. I'm finding more and more showing up doesn't necessarily mean show up in the office, but show up when we need help. And that's one of the biggest things I push culturally is that we show up. We show up for the team. We show up for each other. We show up to get the job done. After that, a lot of the skill sets we can teach. Are you willing to learn? We're going through a lot of, and I'm sure a lot of people are now, AI integrations. And how do you use AI ethically to make sure you're getting the right answers? Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff come out of AI, and sometimes I question. I'm like, oh, doesn't quite seem right. Let's try that again. And you drill down and drill down. So we've got a lot of people that have got a lot of curiosity that are coming through the pipeline, and for the team, that's great. But getting that technical skill is really important as well, and being confident that they can look at that and go, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true, and just because it's in AI doesn't mean it's true either. And that's some of the stuff that we're pushing through and we're teaching, and those skill sets. But you got to be willing to do it too. Got to be willing to experiment. Got to be willing to push it a little bit, and not just be comfortable in the role that I've done for the last 20 years.
So you touched on something that I want to pick out a little bit because I think this is demonstrated. We had a call last week just to get to know one another. And this was something that obviously showed up throughout your own leadership journey, but you mentioned it here, right? Like one of the first things that you said, what are the skills that are required? It's like you need somebody who's going to show up.
Yeah.
And what does that mean today? And what I'm curious about is, have you seen that shift a little bit here over the past 5 or 10 years with just like trying to find people who will show up the way that you would expect them to show up?
Yeah, and it's changed a little bit. We discussed a little bit about how COVID has changed a lot of the mentality of what's the workspace look like, and does everyone have to physically be together, and what did kind of Zoom do us across the integrations. Now, Teams and whatever other format that you're going to use, how do we use those and use them appropriately? And showing up is, you got to be in the game. I've seen plenty of people after COVID. I was in California during COVID, and it was difficult to get people. You couldn't be in the office. You had to be home. You had to work from home. There wasn't a lot of optionality there. You would call people, they would be there. Of course, you would have these Zoom meetings, and it was hard to adjust to when people were used to being together and used to being able to walk around the wall and talk to someone, or lift their head up over the cubicle and say, "Hey, did you see this?" So there was a big adjustment there. I think we went through that adjustment and then almost overcorrected, because then I was starting to see people. You make a phone call and suddenly you're talking to someone, but they're in the supermarket and it's 11 o'clock in the morning. Right. And you're like, this is work time. I wanted to talk to you about invoices, or I wanted to talk to you about that contract that we're trying to sign through procurement so that we can get stuff here. Is that truck loaded? How do you know that if you're at the grocery store? So for me, showing up meant there's a different level of professionality, and it almost turns into, that integrity. It's what you're doing when no one's looking. And I saw a lot of people that struggled with that, unfortunately. But I've also seen a lot of people, and the ones that really want to work are the ones that don't struggle with it at all. It's like it's a no-brainer. It's like I wouldn't even have thought of going to the grocery store at 11 in the afternoon. I'm working. Do people do that? I've had this conversation. I'm like, that's great. Please keep that mentality. That is the right way to think about this at the end of the day. So it's I've seen the shift in what show up means. And I think show up means not necessarily are you in the office, but are you not just available, but actively available.
Love that. Yeah, actively available. And so, could be being close to your phone, being ready to hop on a call. But I think an element of what you're picking out here is like that mentally on, right? You,
Yeah.
you were talking about, contract signing, right? I know a lot of what you all do. You're in the consultant world, right? And so you're
Mhm.
working with other companies,
Yeah.
bringing your engineering expertise and helping them solve problems. And
Correct.
so it's almost like being mentally on and ready to jump in when necessary, because that's what engineers are, right? I mean, they're problem solvers. And so you could get a call
Absolutely. Yeah.
anytime throughout the day from your client and be ready
Mhm.
to respond.
Yep.
Okay.
And the other side of this is showing up is knowing when to throw up that barrier and say, listen, I'm going to show up, but probably not at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
That might be an option that I'm going to choose to go, you know what, I got some family time, I got whatever, I got some me time, I gotta offload every once in a while. I can't be turned on all the time, or you're going to burn me out. So I think there's a balance there. There's a fine way of looking at that and not expecting people to be 24/7. That's not reasonable.
Yeah.
But figure it out. Talk with your people. How can we show up and be the most efficient and effective we can, um, within the hours that we prescribe?
I love that. And I know we're going to touch on that here a little bit later, because you've obviously been in really high power positions, if you will, or high impact positions throughout the majority
Mhm.
of your career. Started out as a consultant, right? And then worked your way through a number of different high visibility finance positions. But then you also balance that out with a family. So we'll dive into that here in a minute. But let's keep on pulling on the thread on what it means to show up. And maybe you
Yeah.
can tell us a little bit about your leadership journey, and maybe if there are any inflection points that led you to kind of the way that you show up as a leader today.
Yeah. You know, one of the first ones was actually a failure, to be honest. It was right coming out of consulting, understanding, making kind of the decision. Hey, listen, I'm not going to be a partner in an accounting firm. That's just not the track I'm interested in. Coming out of college, that was the goal. And then I'm a few years down the road and I'm going, it's just I'm more interested in getting deeper into an organization and helping that
Mhm.
organization and growing with that, um, and pushing that forward. So when I left, I jumped into an organization probably too quickly. I'd made the mental switch, but I made the wrong choice in terms of company, and I jumped into a company that within 9 months was going through a bankruptcy. I didn't
Wow.
look at the right resources, and I was working with someone that I had known previously, and I don't think it was a failure of their leadership. There was some transparency issues that I just wasn't aware of. I didn't know how to ask the right questions. So some of my leadership, as I'm looking at that moving forward, is I learned you got to ask the right questions. But if you don't know ask the right questions, a leader steps up and goes, hey, by the way, this is where we're at. Have you been through this process before? If not, let me know. I'm going to let you know what you're walking into,
Mm.
because I don't want you to walk into a situation that you think is all roses and we start, giving you a shovel because there's plenty of stuff that we got to move around that's not, and it doesn't smell good.
Yeah.
So but here's some of the questions you should ask. I want you to be comfortable before you walk into this. I want you to know what you're walking into. And I didn't have that. And I don't know that it was the fault of the people that I talked with. I just realized that's something I can do better at. And
Mm.
I might lose a good candidate over something like that because they might not be comfortable. But if they're not comfortable, probably not the right candidate at that time either. And that was important to me, because I learned, if I don't know the questions to ask without experience, without someone's pulling me aside and saying, hey, maybe you should have talked about this. Maybe you should have asked this question. Maybe you
Mm.
should have dug a little deeper on this side before you made your decision. And I went off. It was a quick decision, and it was somewhat money driven. Won't lie. I think that's a lot of what people do when they're looking at jobs. Is money's a
Sure.
big part of it, and it absolutely should be.
Yep.
But I didn't focus on the other things, and some of it was naivete. It was just ignorance. And I try and make sure within a group, hey, if we're in a situation like that, how do I help bring those people along? How do I get them to that next level? And that first experience with me of, geez, I've only been here 9 months and now I already don't have a job. What's going on? Am I going to get paid next week because we're going through bankruptcy and they want me to stay? I don't know that I want to stay in a bankruptcy. That's a really hard decision. I've never been through this.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know what? It's what's interesting about what you just mentioned, is this whole idea about alignment, right? And so asking the right questions would have allowed you to unpack that alignment early, get a better understanding if you fit at the company at this point in your career.
Right.
So the leading driver for people leaving companies is misalignment.
Yeah.
And one of and so if you kinda, like, pair that into interviewing, right? Like, what you're talking about is, like, your role as a leader on the team is to make sure that candidates coming into a position know exactly what they're getting themselves into before day
Mhm.
1.
Yeah.
And that is proven to lead to longer tenures, right? Which basically stems from contentment, like, being content with your position. So, sounds like that was a big lesson that you learned right out of the gate then.
A major hard lesson to learn. Very hard lesson to learn. But you know what? I look at it. I don't know that I would change it because I don't know that I would still push through some of the philosophy that I have today, particularly when I interview people. It's at a
Mhm.
major inflection point on how I interview and hire and build teams.
Mm.
I want people that are going to be on my team that share my vision. And if I can't tell them what that vision is and what some of the risks of that vision are, not just the shiny stuff, but what some of the potential risks are, and they still want to do it, listen, that's great. That's the person I want on my team. They're going to slog through it with me, and I'm going
Mhm.
to bring them along. And if they hear that and they go, yeah, it's just not for me, even better.
Yeah.
Great, wish you on your way. But at least we had a good conversation.
I love that. I was gonna ask, like, can we pull on that just a little bit? When you talk about
Yeah.
bringing people along with you, what
Yeah.
does that look like to you? Obviously, in the interviews, what you were just talking about, right? It's kind of
Mhm.
being very transparent about the opportunities of the position for sure, right? But then also the risks. Can you tell me how that shows up in, like, your day-to-day, just working with your team, maybe working through difficulties or hurdles that you're experiencing?
Yeah. I learned long ago. I had a good mentor that talked about, my job is to get things out of the way so you can be successful. And I've learned that's one of the best ways to bring people along with you is you challenge them. Listen, hey, this is what we need. Let's be very clear on what it is.
Mhm.
I'm not pretending that it's easy. I'm not pretending that I even have the solution yet. That's why I have you here. I want to hire good, smart people that can figure things out. I don't have all the answers. So what I'd love to do is be able to get to this spot. Tell me how we get there. And then tell me, what do you need to get there? And if there's something that I need to get out of the way, let's do it. Now I'm bringing you along for the ride. I want your ideas. I want you involved in this. This is not a leadership driven conversation outside of, we've set some strategy. We've got to meet this goal. You might even come up with a better idea.
Yeah.
You might come back and say, hey, I appreciate the strategy that we're doing, but if we did this, we might actually be able to do it even better than what you were thinking. Great. Let's do it. What do you need? And how do I get stuff out of the way that's within my power to do so?
Yeah. I'm curious.
Because I see it all the time, and it's a temptation of my own, right? Like when you're letting your team struggle through a problem, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's exactly what you were talking about, right? Like,
Yeah.
here's a problem that we have. I'm not
Mhm.
100% sure how we're going to get this thing done. I need your help and collaboration. But then as the leader, right, you almost have to hold yourself back a little bit because I'm
Yeah.
sure in those moments, sometimes maybe you have ideas for the answer and everything that you say carries a lot of weight on the team, and they'll maybe very easily drop their ideas and just take on whatever your recommendation is.
Right.
How do you hold yourself back?
I am a big fan of whiteboards.
Mm,
I like to have just kind of thinking sessions on a whiteboard, but I like to do it and make them, I'll be the one at the whiteboard. Tell me what you're thinking. I'm not going to give you my idea, but tell me what you're thinking. And then when you're running out of something, when you're wrapped around the axle on an idea and you just can't get to the next spot, that's where you need a nudge. Hey, have you thought about this piece? What would happen if we did this? What would happen if you had X asset available or X person available, X system available? Whatever the right answer is there as we walk through it. Oh,
yeah,
okay. If I had that, I didn't even think through that. Okay, if I had that, then we could go to the next step and the next step. Great, pull them through it. And that way, they're not just echoing what you just said. That's a big risk, especially if you have a big personality and kind of
yeah,
fill up a room, right, with a team.
sure.
Listen, finance people, HR people, legal people aren't known for their outgoing personalities in general. A lot of them are kind of introverted, and you got to pull people out of their shells to be comfortable sharing those ideas first, and
Mm,
then being excited that they shared those ideas. And
mm,
I've noticed in whiteboard sessions when I can stand at a whiteboard and just go, okay, tell me what you're thinking, walk me through it, let's sketch it out. It's amazing how people will open up and they don't even focus on you. They're focused on the whiteboard. They're focused on the red and green lines that are there, and they're like, okay, oh, now I'm seeing this visually. This is
mm.
actually my idea. This is kind of great. I need to do this more. And I'll see people then do the same thing with their staff and it starts to filter down as well. A little trickle down on some of that activity.
Yeah, I love that. And you're starting to shine a little bit of light on your early consultant days, and I'm sure that made you very successful as a consultant. And maybe we can switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your career, right? Because something that I had mentioned on our first call, and you were like, "Oh yeah, I never really thought about it that way." Is like you've been in a ton of different industries, and really, it sounds like navigating them pretty seamlessly, right? You've been holding very high impact roles in all of these various industries that you've been in. Um, Maybe can you tell me a little bit, when you're working across multiple industries, did your early consulting experience help you? Or do you think that's just a mindset that you've always had, your ability to ask questions and help people solve their own problems?
That's a great question. I would like to think that it's something that's inside, but I couldn't pretend to think that it hadn't had to have been taught as well just through experience. That,
Sure.
in all honesty, it had to have been some of that consultancy of jumping between different clients and showing up at a site and going, I don't know anything about your business, and they sent me here. So I gotta be, I gotta figure this out quickly because I just found
Right.
out last night that I was going to show up at someone's business the next day, and how am I going to help? And a lot of that just turned into asking questions.
Mm,
Hey, what are the major risks that you're concerned with? I've learned more about a business about talking about risks than I have, just about what do you do well.
mm.
The things they do well, they're super proud of, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what makes things go. It's the risks that they're concerned about, and that's where they're really managing their time and managing their effort. And so, hey, what are the risks? And as you start asking those questions, you start finding a lot of the risks are pretty similar across manufacturing and service-based organizations and
Mm,
banking, etc. Wherever you're looking, a lot of those risks end up being pretty similar. They just use a slightly different language. They got
mm,
slightly different acronyms that you have to learn. So some of it was just what language do I have to speak to get to the same answer for some of the same problems that we have, and that helps people feel comfortable. Because if I'm talking about a risk in the advertising world,
mhm,
it's different than the risk in the engineering world in terms of language, but the risk itself is the same. How do I solve a client's problem? How do I make them more profitable and more valuable? And how do I share in that success? as a consultant at the end of the day. And if you can ask those questions and get that answer, there's your service model. I'm just solving problems that you haven't been able to solve or may not have time to solve or don't have the expertise to solve. So what are the right questions to ask? Creatively, it's way different than an engineer going in and asking, how to rebalance a valve that's gotten loose somewhere, or what kind of piping they got to use, and materials of construction, or someone that's developing, online advertising for an Xbox game.
Hmm.
But those conversations end up being, you look down at the paper and you're like, oh, it's the same problem that we're solving.
That's an interesting one. And yeah, the whole centering in on the risk, like everybody, it's very attractive to talk about the things that you're good at, right?
Right?
If you think about, like what excites people on a daily basis, it's like progress towards that goal, right?
Yeah.
And so that probably is the fun conversation for
Mhm.
most people. And then the paperwork, the risks, right? That they know that they should probably protect for, but if they just keep on the forward momentum, then maybe we'll get over the risk. We don't really need to focus on those now. Let's just keep on bringing in more money. The risks are going to eventually catch up to them, and so focusing in on the risks, asking those questions first, is probably feels like a drag to some of the people that you're working with, right? But is one of those elements that's going to make a company successful. And so, like, you've navigated from I know you were in the early, days of AAA, and then you went on to marketing, and then now you're back working for an engineering consulting company, right? Um, but all in finance roles. So when you're coming into a company, a new landscape, like, what are some of the key risks that you're looking for, and what are you trying to protect against?
Sure. Cash is always a big one. What does our
Yeah.
balance sheet look like?
Mhm.
And I would encourage anyone, finance, non-finance, that kind of tells you how the business is going. What does the balance sheet look like? Is there a lot of debt? Is there little cash? Is there a bankruptcy risk? And these are the things that I didn't ask when I first came out of consulting and went into the private industry.
Mhm.
And I didn't look at those things. And what's the culture like? If I bring up a problem, is it pushed down, or is that problem, hey, how do we solve it? Is it does it have weight to it?
Mhm.
Um, in moving within that organization, how do I be successful, and how do I help my team be successful? I'm an internal customer service agent. I got to help people be successful externally. So what can I do so you don't have to worry about looking inward at the company? You can look outward and go find the next contract, go find the next engineering consultancy, the next marketing consultancy agreement that we have, and not have to worry about what do I put on my expense report for this accounting code. Um, how do we eliminate that kind of stuff and not worry about those things with those guys, because it's just not how they think, and nor is it something I want them focused on. So how does
Mhm.
my team take that on? How does the HR team take on helping manage people and going through that process and making sure the hiring process really works,
Mhm.
and how we identify talent and how do we enhance talent from a merit-based perspective and eliminate any of the favoritism, old boys club kind of thing, and
Sure.
have those conversations. So I think within that team construct, when we're looking at it, it's how do we help you? And a lot of it's listening, asking those questions. And sometimes they're like, I don't know that anyone's actually asked me that. I just have to do it. And then okay, well, what if you didn't have to do that? What does that free you up to do?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but like you're good at building the systems because you know finance well enough to then allow the people who are out doing business development, right, or doing sales or doing engineering to focus in on their job. And so
Yeah.
if you can set up the system so it's very easy for them to code things quickly, right, then they don't
Hmm.
have to think about what code am I using here for this particular task. It should be all
Right.
second nature for them, and you guys
Hmm.
can figure out the details on the back end.
Yeah.
Um, but something else that you touched on was the HR aspect, because
Hmm.
that's another really difficult one where, I mean, I see it across many organizations where you'll have peer managers, right? And they'll interview the same candidate and come out with wildly different interpretations about how that candidate scored, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, what I'm curious is, you know, are there any patterns that you see? Because you've worked at a number of different companies, right? And so, are there any patterns that you see that emerge for the companies who are really able to attract and retain great talent? And then the second part of that question is, is it more systems based, or is it more you just have like better leaders? Like what's really making the difference?
Sure. Good question. I think to start off with, I think how someone goes through recruiting sets them up for the rest of their career within an organization. I am not a big advocate of things like team interviews. I don't like panel interviews because it introduces too much groupthink. I don't mind having peers interview and come out with vastly different um, grading, if you will. I'm not sure of a better term of that rating that
Sure.
I came out with of the candidates and going, hey, listen, I asked them these questions and it didn't quite work. And I wasn't getting, and maybe they're tired, maybe it's not their day, but this was my experience. And I like having those conversations individually because I think it does eliminate that groupthink. It eliminates everyone. Oh yeah, that was a great candidate. And then you
Yeah.
have maybe one more individual interview and you're like, how did this get through the panel? We didn't meet the requirements. The questions they couldn't answer. I'm a little concerned. What happened to my panel? I've had that happen too many times. So I've strongly advocated that the recruiting process be as professional as it can be, because I think that sets up the right candidate. Now you bring
Mhm.
them into the system and get them successful. What is that? I think it's both. I don't know that it's just leaders, because if you have great leaders in a terrible system, everything's hard. And the leaders are sympathetic to it, but about all they can say is, yeah, it's hard. There's not much else you can do there on that side. But if you've got a great system and a great leader, wow, now you're doing things that other organizations aren't doing. You're investing in the organization and you're investing in the person. And now that person again can focus outward. What's your main role? That's what I want you worried about. I don't want you worried about, hey, is the ERP system going to work today or not? Hey, if I go into expense reports, is it going to take me 10 minutes just to open the portal so I can submit my expense report?
Yeah.
And only to find out that my email was rejected for some reason. Um, no one wants to go through that process. And I think if you've got both, you've hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
Most organizations, it's a bit of a combination. You've got the situation where systems are moving so fast, a lot of stuff is Frankenstein together. And so you try and get the clearest path that you can and try and simplify as much as you can. And the other side is sometimes you got great systems and not great leaders, and people enjoy working there uh, when their leader's not around. And
Mm,
that would be a red flag for me. Is, oh, good, he's not here. All right, now we can actually get down to business. Let's actually get some stuff done.
yeah.
And that's not long-term success either. Clients see it. I've seen that as well. I've been in some terrible client meetings. People taking other people's work and taking credit for it. And you've got that person sitting right there who's worked with the client, and the client knows who actually did the work, and that having a client pull out and go, listen, I can't work with someone that is going to take someone else's credit.
Mm,
Regardless of the quality of the work that I got at the end of the day, you guys just lost the contract. Thank you very much. Um, those are the kind of people, and then you lose the wrong people. You lose the wrong talent. Um, and I've seen it systems based though too. It's just too hard to work here, and I'm tired of fighting it. You lose the wrong talent that way too.
yeah. I think I'd have to agree with you 100% that it's probably both strong leadership and strong systems that support execution, like quick execution. Yeah, I agree with you on the panel interview piece and how groupthink can skew your mindset on a candidate. I've made some of those hires myself, right? Where it's like, you get the huddle going after the
Yeah.
last interview, and everybody's like,
Mhm.
"Oh yeah," like we're on like a high almost because like, "Oh yeah, that person was
Yeah.
really really good," and then you get them in, you're like, "Wow, like this person doesn't play in the sandbox well."
Right.
Like, how did we miss that, right? It's
Yep.
like, oh, we
Yep.
were caught up with their charisma. And something that I've noticed has helped us, and I actually got this idea. I know Google does a pretty good job of this, and I've had some friends who have worked there.
Hmm.
Is coming up with a rating system. Very
Yeah.
simple. right? Just on core components that your company cares about.
Yep.
Having everybody score candidates individually, right?
Yeah.
You can do this in something like we build ours in Microsoft Teams so that it dumps it all into a forms, gives you an average, and then you're like,
Yep.
okay, this is the clear. And then the hiring manager is the one that reviews it, brings it back to the panel as a recommendation. Like, okay, and this is my recommendation for hire because this is the best person, right? Scored
Yep.
across everything. I've
Yep.
noticed that eliminates the groupthink. It allows people to make their decisions individually, and
Mhm.
then allows you to move faster too. Because that was another piece that you touched on. It's like you're moving a candidate through the recruiting process is their first like opportunity to see what does it look like working for Anvil, right?
Yeah.
Oh, did I have to come back for like these weird did they not have an idea of what the clear interview path is going to look like from
Right.
start to finish? Have I
Yeah.
had to come back for multiple conversations with similar people just to
Mhm.
reiterate the same answers to the same questions that they've already asked me?
Yep.
Or is it a very streamlined process where I know it's a 3 interview process and if I make it through all three, then I'm
Mhm.
hired and they're hiring me within 48 hours of the last interview, right? It's like you can act so much faster and
Yeah.
then give like a great first impression to those candidates if your systems are clean. And then
Yeah.
obviously the systems make it very, very easy for those great leaders who are good at assessments, good at making quick decisions based on
Right.
their experience that they're bringing to the table to score somebody.
Yeah. No, you hit it out of the park right there. That's a lot of the process that we do is we use those individual ratings. We adjust the ratings based on the job role. Of course, we
Sure.
try and tie it to job description. Some of
Yep.
them are non-changeable though. Cultural fit,
Mhm.
type of person, leadership style. If it's a leadership type position, if there's going to be, how do you mentor?
Yeah.
Have you mentored in the past? What is your experiences? Things like that. We'll throw through our rating as well and make sure, hey, what's the average. And again, like you said, sometimes you get one where they come through and they're like, man, that guy's mentored all kinds of people. I gave him a 5, and then someone else comes in and goes, I don't think that person's ever led anyone. And you get a one. Okay, we're not asking the same questions for some reason, or
Right.
not sure how we ended up there. But let's talk through that. That's an interesting conversation. But I completely agree with that approach. And in fact, we're taking that approach outside of just like hiring and stuff. We've taken it to procurement because we're
Mm,
hiring suppliers to be partners with us. We're taking it to our own clients and saying, hey, we'd like to be, let's be rated. Let's walk through this. It might not be like an NPS type schedule, but
yeah.
we're walking through on a quarterly basis and saying, hey, let's rate ourselves. How are we doing as an organization? How is this partnership working? Let's rate that. So I think it works in multiple locations and multiple organizations, but that recruiting sets that up to say, this is the kind of organization we are. I'm not going to put you through 16 interviews and it's not going to take 6 weeks. We can't afford to wait that long. And
Yeah.
I've got 4 other good candidates sitting here going, I'm interviewing other places too.
Right.
So it's not us interviewing the person's interviewing us. And if I've got really good candidates and I've just gone through this process, I needed to hire a controller, a financial controller. And we put the job description out. We had really good candidates respond pretty quickly.
Thanks.
And we had those people in within 2 weeks of placing the ad. We had 5 people that we interviewed, walked through what that was going to be, had it set up internally. You hit it, 3 interviews and a decision. We had the decision out within 24 hours.
Awesome.
Um,
Yeah.
Accepted. We're moving forward. I didn't have to wait too long. Where I've been in other situations where you get too much red tape and you're 3 months later and you're like, I really wanted to hire that guy, but we lost him because he took another job. I wanted to hire that person, but they became so disinterested because they were on their 10th interview and they were like, well, what's the process here, guys? What?
Yeah, I love that. That's a great example, and congrats on getting a new controller in.
Yeah.
Um, but I like how you applied systematizing things, which is this is like the boring work, right? That nobody wants to do.
Mhm.
Like, who the hell wants to come up with a scoring template for suppliers, right?
Yep.
I don't even want to do that. Like, even if you can understand the benefit to your organization to standardize and be very objective about the way that you're scoring suppliers, candidates, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's the boring work that
Yeah.
doesn't take a lot of time if you're very skilled at what you're doing, which is maybe interviewing suppliers and
Mhm.
identifying the right fit. But it's boring to do. But what I like about that is it allows you to move quickly, right? Like if you have a clean process, if you have a clean definition at the start of exactly what you're looking for,
Yeah.
and then you build out that template that's standardized and very objective, then you or somebody who's less experienced than you can both go into that conversation. Maybe you can
Hmm.
spread yourself thinner, right? By bringing more people along with you to
Yeah.
score these individuals or these companies on objective criteria. You can almost start to remove yourself a little bit, maybe give yourself a
Mhm.
little bit more bandwidth. Let's dive in a little bit because one thing that I was curious about and you sparked when we were talking last week, you've been in controller roles, right? CFO roles throughout the
Mhm.
majority of your career. And but you also have a family
Right.
and you've done things like coach your kids' soccer teams, right?
Mhm.
You're currently like you're like a referee or something
Correct.
on the side for
Yep.
soccer, right? Like
Yep.
obviously balancing, how much time you're spending at work
Mhm.
and how much time you're spending with your kids and your wife and your family is very important to you. Um, I see a lot of my colleagues start to lose it, like once they hit, senior manager, director level, like
Right.
the work really balloons, and then they're all in on work, and like life kind of falls by the wayside.
Sure.
But it seems like you've had a pretty healthy balance of that throughout your career. What are some of the techniques that's allowed you, or maybe like an approach that's just allowed
Mhm.
you to maintain that balance while working in all these high profile positions?
Right. Well, first was doing it wrong. Right. So, you know, sometimes life experience is the best teacher,
Yeah,
and you do it wrong. You get in that first role, and you're excited about that role, and you really dig in. And it's my first time as a senior manager, and I got people that are, I'm responsible for, and that's their livelihoods, and you take that very seriously, and you forget, hey, there's other things in life at the same time. Work is always going to be here, and
mm,
that's one thing I try and keep in the back of my head. Work is going to be there. Um, I only have a certain amount of time for family. I only have a certain amount of time when my kids are young. My kids aren't so young anymore. The three of my four kids now are out of the house. I've only got one left. So what am I doing with that time? It's a little more important to me, in all honesty. And it's not to say that my career is not important. It's not to say that people I work with aren't important, but it's a prioritization. And I learned that I had to set boundaries and just have very transparent conversations. Listen, I'm going to work from here to here. There will be nights and there's going to be times where you got to spool up. Hey,
sure.
listen, it's going to be busy from February to May. Hey, family, I'm spooling up. And I'll have a conversation with them too. This is what's happening. It's going to be harder. I get it. I will be home when I can, but sometimes things are going to get spooled up, and this is the time. And then I'll tell work, hey, listen, we did the spool up. Now I'm backing off. My boundary for this time period is here. You can call me, but I may not get back to you unless it's an emergency, and it needs to be a real emergency. So let's set up those parameters and let's have that conversation. Anvil does a great job of this, probably better than other organizations I've been in. So we allow people to work from anywhere for 4 weeks during the year. Doesn't have to
Cool.
be all at the same time. I don't really care where you go, as long as you're available during work hours. If you're on the other side of the world and it's during the night, that's a you thing. That was the decision we made. But good luck. Let's do it. Enjoy it. And we'll get there. We have plenty of people that have, they've stated one of the reasons why they like working at Anvil is because of stuff like that, is because we're able to set boundaries and have boundaries. And, I try not to call people on vacation, up
Mm,
or down. The CEO's on vacation. I'm not calling him. Just and outside of something incredibly drastic, I'm leaving him alone.
mm.
But then I have the same conversation with him on, hey, no calls, no phone calls. I've got
Yeah.
people that are set up that can backfill the things that I have that are critical. We can get to the cash that we need to get to. So let's be careful with that. And if you're consistent with that and you communicate it, I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I'm noticing a theme across all the elements that we've discussed today. It seems like that theme's transparency.
Yeah.
Right. Transparency leads to alignment both in the family life and the work life, right? From recruiting and giving people their first taste of what it's like to look for your company, or what it's like to work for your company, um, and then making sure that you're setting those boundaries, right? I'm
Mhm.
also hearing little themes like delegation, bringing people along with you, putting the responsibility with your teams that they can make those decisions themselves. I think you brought that up with your whiteboarding sessions, right? How
Yeah.
do you get people bring people along with you. Yeah, I think that's kind of been the theme of this conversation. Probably what's made you really successful in your career and allowed yourself to have a bit of that work-life balance, while still working in a high-profile, I'm sure, high stress at some points positions throughout your career.
Yeah, no, you put it better than I did, to be honest with you. It's partly just the way that I am. It's the way that I like to be managed as well. Um, and doing that and making sure people know I'm very direct. And it's funny when you've seen people come from an organization that there wasn't transparency. They didn't have like a direct conversation. Even when you call them out, hey, you missed on this. This was a miss. I missed it. And maybe you didn't have enough support, but you missed on this. And I need you to raise your hand and we got to do better. How do we get you to do better? And some people are like, oh, we can have that conversation. Well, yeah, I'm going to call you out because you messed it up. And some of that comes from perhaps from my coaching background. Some of it comes from being a referee. A lot of times you just got to tell players who, are upset with you. It's just the way it is. Sure. We're just going to move on. Coaching players, it's, hey, you screwed that up, but you're okay. You didn't get pulled out of the game. I want you to correct it and move on, and let's go to the next play. And I take a lot of that into, it's funny, coaching, 15-year-olds is a lot like running an organization. Is you got to be direct with them, but you can coach each one of them just a little bit differently to get the best out of them, to know how are they going to respond and what are they going to do and how do we move it forward. But you still have to be direct. Otherwise, they don't know where they stand. They don't know. They know they screwed up. Most do. And they're kind of waiting. Is the hammer going to drop? What happens when I screw up? And when they screw up and you're like, no, I got your back. Yeah. You made the best decision with the best information we had. Maybe we should have dug deeper for better information. Or maybe it was just a screw up and we got to learn from this and let's just not do it again. So let's document it. Let's get it in the files. Let's make sure. That's an approach we're not taking anymore.
I love that. Mike, okay. We're getting here to the end of our interview.
Yes, sir.
And what I'm curious about, I always ask this of all the guests who are on my show, what's that one piece of advice that you would give to leaders who want to become the best leaders possible for their teams?
Yeah. I had another mentor, and one of her favorite phrases was, let's get all the liars in a room and have a conversation. And it took me, the first time I heard it, it took me a minute to go, I'm not sure how to take that because I'm one of the liars that are in the room. So, but what, the intent of that is that people all think that they have their own truth, but really there's just the truth. And so let's get everyone in, let's get everyone's perspective. And we hear the truth somewhere in the middle. It's usually where it is. I don't need the emotional bend to it. I don't need the, I screwed up, but I don't want to say it bend to it. Let's just get everyone in the room and solve the problem. And from a great leadership perspective, I learned sitting in those sessions of, hey, I'm going to call someone out in this session, but I'm also going to back them up. And I'm going to call someone else out for not backing them up. And here's where we're going to go forward. It's okay that you screwed up. Let's just not do it again. It's not a repeatable thing. And here's what we're going to do to move this forward and to solve the problem. And versus having to do it one-on-one, versus embarrassing somebody. You can do it in the right way, in the right fashion, but you do a couple of things. You get all the intel you needed. You have a team that's still together, and you have a team potentially that's even stronger because now they know, hey, if we just work together, we don't have to sit in the liars group anymore. We don't need to do that anymore. Let's work this thing out. Let's get this done. Let's work amongst ourselves to figure it out. And that approach for me has worked great. It was a great learning experience for me to figure that out. And I think any leader should be able to pull in people with divergent views and have that conversation, get to the truth, and then move on. We're just going to move on. We might agree to disagree, but it doesn't mean that we're not moving on.
Mike, I love that. And it really kind of grounds what we talked about in this conversation, right? Transparency, objectivity, get everybody in the room, make the team stronger by showing that we can call one another out if we see something a different way than somebody else is speaking about, right? And then we can also back up those individuals when they actually tell the truth, right? That's modeling the behavior, right, that you want in your team.
Exactly.
Well, Mike, This was super fun. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me for the past hour and unload. I've learned a lot today.
No, as have I. So listen, that's why I love having these kinds of conversations, because you always get something out of it, particularly when someone says something back to you and you're like, maybe I should use that moving forward. That's always better when it came out of my mouth. So I appreciate that.
Awesome, Mike. Well, hey, have a great rest of your day, man.
You too. Thanks, Greg.